So, how y'all doing? Sugamonger. Not everything Cold Steel makes is freaking crazy, right? Not all of it. But the company themselves, they don't seem scared to put out a product that almost doesn't make sense practically, to go over the line for something they know somebody is going to be carrying with them every day, right? Because this is a Cold Steel Tiger Claw, right? And if you're going to be carrying around a Karambit, this is completely unnecessary, right? Now, I'm not saying it's bad, right? See, if I saw somebody carrying this, I wouldn't be thinking, oh, why is he carrying that? He's like a mall ninja. No, this thing is badass and it's extremely capable. So somebody who chooses to carry this is just choosing to give themselves that little bit extra than is actually needed to to get the job done. May make it a little bit easier, may give you a little bit more benefit. I don't know. Especially that doesn't carry through with this whole knife. I'll get into that, but just the overall ability, the cutting ability that this thing has is freaking ridiculous. They claim that this is a 3-inch blade. It's kind of cool. They actually give you the specs on the outside of the box, and for legal reasons, I think that's why they claim the 3 inches, because it makes it legal to carry in a lot more areas. And so people are going to be more inclined to buy it, right? But let's pull out this little measuring tape here. We'll go from the tip or the pivot of the blade to the tip of the blade. And as you can see, that is about 3.6 inches. If I can actually get that in frame. That's about 3.6 inches from pivot to the tip. That blade is 3.6 inches long, as far as I'm concerned. But if you were to actually go down the spine, we'll actually give it that little bit of relief as well. You come down the spine and give yourself that little bit of a level there, right? And that is actually where that 3-inch measurement comes in, is measuring directly down the spine. So they're not actually accounting for the curvature of the blade, which is a positive and negative, because normally you don't count the length of the knife as the cutting edge. You don't measure the cutting edge when you're talking about the overall blade length. So you'd think that that's the same thing here, except it doesn't work the same with a hawkbill, since this blade is actually bent over, right? So I don't know. Is that 3 inches or is that 3.6 inches? Tell me your opinion. Let me know what you think, because I'm like tossed up. I'm like in the middle. I have no idea on, because I mean, I would like to go to a judge and be like, hey, what would you say is this 3 inches? See what they say. Other than that, just getting the actual overall knife, getting into that, the cutting ability for this thing is ridiculous. Just in that hawkbill, I like the way that this is done, because it's got a pretty aggressive sweep. It's a very deep swell in that. It's a very deep hook, very comes out, very deep hook, I'll say that. It's got a very pointy tip on it, very sharp tip. You can see the way it's done there, and it's a chisel grind. It's not a true chisel grind. It is a V bevel on your main bevel down to, excuse me, my freaking phone's ringing. Yeah. So it is a V ground blade, but it's got a chisel grind. It's very reminiscent to something like you see on Emerson. And Emerson actually has the Emerson Combat Karambit and Emerson Karambit are some of the more popular models actually on the market. And I wonder if they kind of stole this design from that, because it actually does give an excellent cutting profile, in that if you have a decent edge on it, if you've got a good edge on it, it's less material behind the actual cutting edge. So it's very thin, very slicey cutting edge, and it works really well for a karambit, because a karambit in itself, if you're using it in a traditional manner, it is a push cut, right? So that having that very sharp, very keen edge is definitely a major positive, especially with this overall design blade, because you are going to be able to stab with this. Don't get me wrong, you hit something like that and it's definitely going to work. But it's not the best, right? So this is orientated more towards a slashing implement, and for that, it really is going to work quite well, honestly, I think. The handle itself here it's almost makes this is a folding karambit, right? In all technical sense, a karambit is a fixed blade, right? It's like a Bowie knife, but this is, a folding karambit, if that's a thing. This is, because it's got the hook on the end. It's a traditional hawkbill blade design. It is a karambit, but it's interesting because it's got a very straight handle, and it's very ergonomic in that it feels like something this would be on like an EDC knife. Holding it like this feels like something. It doesn't feel like a traditional karambit in my hand. It's very straight. It's very rigid. When I actually come down and use the hole, it's got the same feeling except that my finger's off the end in a hole. And I actually don't like this as much. It just doesn't feel as secure. It's not necessarily a negative. It's just personal preference. But it's definitely, I've got a good purchase on it. It's not going to go anywhere, especially with that added retention from the ring in my hand. And the reverse grip, it actually feels fantastic. And look how much reach, right? I get a really good purchase on this, really good squeeze on this knife. Look how much is sticking out of my hand. You want to talk about reach? One of the major negatives people talk about a lot with the karambit, and I actually agree with, strop the tip a bit on this mat, right? But I actually agree with is that in the reverse grip you are cutting down your reach just a bit, right? But a karambit is a very close and very in up close, you're like hugging somebody, you know what I mean, when you're actually using one of these knives. So the reach isn't necessarily a major deal, but in the fact that it still gives you that reach, you know what I mean, even though it's not absolutely necessary to have it there, again, goes along with the whole blade, having the big beefy thing. It's not necessary, but it's an advantage. I mean, it is there, and it is going to, you are going to be able to connect. I am a little bit worried about making contact, because if you come in too far, and that's something, if you're very used to fighting with a normal karambit, if you're very trained with something, you know, like a fox or a Spyderco, whatever it is, the blade generally starts a lot closer to your hand. And so you might actually you're trying to hit material up in this region, right? So with this knife here, you may actually have to adjust your tactic just a little bit. You may have to adjust the way you're actually using this to fully get that same cut, because there is that material actually, you know, there is so much of the handle sticking out before you actually get to any cutting edge, right? So again, that's a negative and it's a positive. But the CTS Xhp, I haven't actually mentioned that. That is a fantastic steel. Relatively similar in carbide composition and just, you know, carbon content, excuse me, to something like D2, but it's, I want to say, shit, I want to say 16%. Hold on, actually. I'll get the specs for this. Yeah, so it's 1.6% carbon at 16% chromium, right? So molybdenum vanadium steel. So it's definitely an excellent steel. Cold Steel has actually been doing really well, not just on the quality of steel. They've been upping their game in overall qualities of materials themselves, but they've been doing a better job with overall fit and finish, with heat treatment, actually. I think the blades are retaining edges a little bit better than they would have previously. So the major negatives on this knife, I don't have too much to say about the XHP. You might be able to tell because I haven't had a whole lot of experience with it. This isn't a hard use knife. I normally beat up a lot of wood, dead wood, to get, that's how I test most of my edges, is I just beat it on trees. And I can't do that, you know, I have. This is actually, all of that right there is from cutting vines and shit off the trail. But I mean, so it's hard to do really hard work with this. So I don't have an extremely good impression of the steel, but the impression that I do have is it's good so far. I've only stropped it. I haven't, you can see it. That's a factory edge. The only thing I've ever done is stropped it up, and it's still, I mean, it's definitely sharper in this region here than in the back, but it's still, I mean, it's still got a working edge on it. It's still a good edge. The G10 is excellently finished. I hate the pocket clip. You can see the little lip sticking right there off the pocket clip. That was actually bent down, and I had to rebend it up to be able to slide this thing in and out of my pocket. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that, but it was ridiculous. I actually had to modify the pocket clip. I don't like the shape of it. It works the way that it works as well, but I don't like the shape. I don't like the fact that I had to modify it to actually make it work properly. Tension out of the box was good. Tension's good. Blade centering is a little bit off. My preferred method of closing with this is I've been holding it like this here and then just letting it straight up fall like a Spyderco. If my finger's further back, you can see the cutting edge will contact, but as long as my finger's at the forward end of that choil there, I've really got no risk of that blade making contact. So I just drop the blade, close it the rest of the way. This is my preferred method of closing this thing. You can see blade centering's off. It's like it was a little bit worse than that out of the box. I took it apart, adjusted it a little bit, corrected it a little bit, but it's still off a little bit. Doesn't wave out of my pocket very well. My preferred method of carry is actually, you can see I've got it set up to wave, but honestly I've just been pulling it out of my pocket like that and opening it up in a traditional manner. And I gotta do a stick job on this triad lock. You hear that shit? That needs to be adjusted, but that's a cold steel Tiger Claw. Big badass. It's not necessarily big, just straight up badass blade from Cold Steel. Keep doing it. Yep, y'all have a good one.